everyone, I'm Hope Dorman, Senior Content Marketing Manager here at Kajabi. I'm super excited for our panel and to learn from our guest speakers, Grace Abbott and Steve Harris. First, let's hear about our speakers directly from them. Grace, can you go ahead and intro yourself?
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for having me. So excited to be here. I am Grace. I'm the marketing director at To Be Magnetic, and we are a neuroscience meets manifestation brand that sells workshops based on reprogramming your subconscious limiting beliefs so you can align with what you want. So we've built a pretty interesting membership program, and we have a big podcast called Expanded. And I've been on the team there for about 5 years, building and scaling our school. And I also have a marketing and design background.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Steve, how about you?
Hey, good to be here. Well, my name is Steve Harris, and basically I help entrepreneurs communicate with their customers better so that they can make more sales and then they can scale their businesses. I'm all about execution. I'm all about getting things done, which is why for me, this panel is just super exciting because it's right up my alley. So can't wait to be here.
Awesome. So in our panel discussion today, we're going to be chatting about how to overcome perfection paralysis, how to build that entrepreneurial mindset, and some tips for launching your first product. So we'll have a Q&A in the last about 10 minutes of the session. So get your questions in the chat and hopefully we'll be able to get to yours. So for our first question, let's really dive into that entrepreneurial mindset. We hear from a lot of our Kajabi heroes that it's so important to just start and be okay with that first product not being perfect. But of course, that's easier said than done, right? So I would love to know, how have you overcome perfection paralysis in the past? Steve, do you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah, sure. For me, I always tell people that your quest for perfection is really procrastination in disguise. You know what I mean? The fact that you're trying to dot all your I's and cross all your T's, you're afraid, you're scared, you're like that, you're running on a treadmill, you have the semblance of motion, but you're not going anywhere. So you're majoring on the minors, minoring on the majors. And I find that, a lot of people just get caught up in perfection paralysis. They say things like, oh, I think I need to have the split test a little bit better, or maybe I need to change the font. So we're working on all the things that really don't matter because it gives us a sense of motion. But in reality, we're not really going anywhere. So for me, the ugly truth about it is, and, I hate to break it to anyone who's just, who probably doesn't think so, but the ugly truth about it is you're being selfish. You're being selfish because you're putting yourself in front of the people that you're supposed to serve. So it may not be convenient. It may not be easy. Don't just get caught up in the whole, I need to get more, and unfortunately, perhaps a lot of the people who are watching may also be guilty of this as well. So sometimes we get caught up because we're buying new courses, we're learning new programs, we're getting new tactics. And all we're doing is we are getting certifications or qualifications because we need validation. I'm going to say that again. We're learning a lot of things because we need validation, because we're saying to ourselves, maybe I'm not good enough. I hate to break it to you, my friend. You are good enough. So get out of your way and get started.
Awesome. And Grace, what has your experience been with overcoming perfection paralysis?
Yeah, well, I love what Steve said about fear. And I think imposter syndrome and self-doubt are big things that come up when you're getting ready to launch something and put yourself out there and, share your gifts with the world or whatever you have to offer. And I think a great reminder for people is that nobody has it all figured out. Actually, everybody's just experimenting and giving it a try. I think there's this tendency to try and continue to hire out experts or get more qualifications or, just like Steve was saying, but everything is just an experiment. Even people that are experts aren't really experts. We try something and it works until it doesn't work. And then you pivot and you try something again. So I think the best thing that you can do to overcome that is to remember that there actually is no perfect way to do it. There is nobody that could do it any better than you. And if you try something and it fails, you just pivot and you try something again. And ultimately, that's what's going to make people successful in the long run, is their willingness to, give something a shot and continue to pivot with humility and know that, they're going to come out the other side with success if they're willing to kind of just jump into the ring and go for it.
Yeah, I really love your point about even with experts, it works until it doesn't. Nothing's
Mhm.
going to work perpetually. So then jumping off of that train of thought, just because a product is not perfect doesn't mean that quality doesn't matter. Like it still needs to be good enough, right? So I'm wondering, how can a creator reset their expectations to the level of quality that's still going to serve their business and their brand? Grace, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, definitely. So there's plenty of just like brass tacks about launching something that you're going to want to make sure you have under control. Do you have a brand identity that you feel like reflects who you are inside, not necessarily what you think is trendy or, what you've seen brands you like do, but does it really speak to your target demographics needs? Does it reflect the level of content and education that you're going to be putting out? And does it tell like a compelling story about what you have to offer? And then, of course, things like making sure you're doing a copy edit, that you have high quality audio and video, and all those things that are going to make the user experience as high quality as possible. But I think more than anything, just going for it. Like, you don't need to have a really high-end production team to make a great video. You can shoot something nice on your iPhone. Just be mindful that there's nothing in the background and that the audio quality is good, and just focus on those little tweaks that you can do alone at home before you feel like, oh my gosh, I have to spend $10,000 on a high quality shoot or whatever. So I think, maybe looking at examples of what you think is best in class and then figuring out how can I emulate that on my own, instead of feeling like it is like the big budget production that's going to get in my way from launching something.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many tools that are accessible to us. You can go get a $50 microphone and that's going to be better than like the microphone on your laptop. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars on a singular piece of equipment, lots of hacks to get most of the way there. So now I'd love to talk about getting started. Steve, what is the specific first step that you think a creator should take to making their first digital product? I know you mentioned it's so important to just start. So what is that thing that someone can do to take that first step?
I think it's a great question. So one of the things that I do recognize is a lot of entrepreneurs who are watching, you have a message you want to share with the world. You've got something that's valuable that you want to communicate, which is why you're with Kajabi. But I do find that a lot of entrepreneurs, while they're caught up with the message, they're not thinking about the market. So I'm not so big on the idea that, yes, it's all about your message. Yes, it is. But you must ask yourself a question: is there a market for my message? And that's critical. Now, how do you identify if there's a market for your message? Really quite simple. You got to ask certain questions. Number one, what's the problem that I want to solve? What's the problem? What's the problem that my message or my passion can solve? That's a question. Another question is, who's got the problem? Who needs this wonderful solution that or life experience that you've been through? Who needs it? Number three, where are they? These people that you're called to serve and share your light with, where are they? Number four, how are you going to find them? Right? Number five, how are they going to find you? Right? Number six, which is important, number six is my favorite. How much money do they have? Because at the end of the day, if you've put out all this great content and people can't afford, whether it's a 37 or 97, 147 or 200 or $10,000 product, you may have just, you've just kicked the can down the road. You may have sown the seed, but you may not necessarily get the harvest exactly when you want it. And I don't know about you guys watching, you want it now, right? So you got to ask that question. And then a final question might be, why should anyone come to you instead of the millions of alternatives that are out there? I mean, right now on the chat, there are so many people who do exactly what you do. So what makes you special? And trust me, there is something special about you. So in my way, that is my creator journey, to be able to think about it and say, how do I get my message out in the world? And how do I also get remunerated for the message I've put out there?
Yeah, I really love centering around market research and making sure that there is an audience that can buy what you're going to produce. Grace, how about you? Any specific first step that you've taken or that you would recommend for creators looking to get started?
Yeah, I love what Steve said. And I think to be magnetic, especially whenever we've wanted to test a new product or, have a concept in mind for something, we'll always kind of do like a little soft launch, whether it's, a landing page to collect emails that really tells the story about what the product is that we're selling, just to sort of understand the interest around the product. And in that, you can really experiment with different positioning and messaging and see, who will put their email down for something that is focused on this versus focused on that. And I think also just kind of testing the market, testing the language, what's resonating with people, even before you have something to offer, can be a great way to start to build a foundation and understand, where interest levels lie and what content is resonating with them most. And then you can always shape your messaging, your product around that piece too, if you're not ready to launch something right away.
Yeah, absolutely love that sort of soft launch strategy. We see a lot of creators use that for a lot of different products, and it's great to go get that feedback, kind of tying into what Steve said about doing that market research and making sure that there's demand there. So then getting back to the crux of this topic, the paralysis, to overcome the feelings of paralysis, a lot of people find it helpful to break down a project into those more bite-sized pieces and have a path. So I'm wondering, what's your best tip for creators to start breaking down that process to creating their first digital product? Steve, do you want to take this one?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, one of the things that I tell people is you've got to surround yourself with people whose floors are higher than your ceilings. If you surround yourself with people whose floors are higher than your ceilings, it kind of drags you a little bit higher. It makes you want to come up a little bit higher, so that that no one's got it all figured out. Like Grace said, we're all in this journey. I always like to use the metaphor of a race or a marathon. In this race, when you're monetizing your message, there are going to be people who are running ahead of you. Now, if you're constantly looking and saying to yourself, look, Amy's, ahead of me, Brendan's, way ahead of me, there's no way I'm ever going to catch up with them. There's no way I'm ever going to have this empire that they have. You also need to remember that if you look behind you, there are people who look at you and you're their version of Amy, you're their version of Brendan. I tell people that no matter how small you think your light is, it's bright enough to take somebody out of darkness, right? So celebrate the fact that what you've got, the light that you're sharing, this little light of yours, you've got to let it shine, right? Because no matter how small that light is, it's bigger, it's brighter, it's bold enough to just get people out of darkness. So start with where you are, start with what you have. Just to quickly say, I remember a couple of years ago when I launched my very first podcast, I was living in Africa, I was living in Nigeria, I was watching you guys on Zoom, I was watching you guys online, and we didn't have all the tech. I couldn't afford all the tech. I couldn't afford a big studio. But I said to myself that it's one of the things that I say, it's not what you don't have that limits you. It's what you have, but you don't know how to use, right? It's not what you don't have that limits you. It's what you have, but you don't know how to use. And so what did I do? I picked up my phone, recorded my podcast on my phone with all the ums and my issues and all my accents and everything, got Audacity, chopped it up, put it on social media and say, hey guys, this is my podcast. Whether it was 5 downloads or 50, I got consistent. Just start with where you are, with what you have, because what you have is more than enough.
Absolutely. Yeah. There are tons of free tools that people can use, like Audacity, that can help you get started and get most of the way there. Grace, how about you? How do you like to break down your project management process when starting a new digital product?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I know there's a lot of steps and it can feel really overwhelming. Like you want to have the whole site up and you want it to look perfect, and the writing and the filming and all that kind of stuff. I usually recommend everybody just start with an outline and figure out like, what is the main objective of my course? How am I going to flow through each section with cohesion? What are the action items associated with each step of the process? And how is everybody going to leave the course feeling like they had an aha moment, or they learned something, or they want to come back later? And I would also think a lot about how you want people to use your course, right? Is it something that you want people coming back to every day to do something like a meditation or a daily practice? That automatically makes your course more valuable and worth paying for, because it's something that they're checking in with on a regular basis versus just learning a skill and forgetting about the course. So I think however you can think about your course being a part of everybody's daily lives instead of just like a quick fad, that they're maybe interested in for now, and they take a look at it and they never log in again. I've bought so many e-courses and never even logged into them, or like, I looked at it once and I never mastered the skill. Like, how do you take whatever you're teaching, whether it's finance or photography or wellness or whatever, and then create like a little bite-size daily practice out of it that people can continue to use throughout their lifestyle, so they want to continue to pay you and see the value in your course and tell people about how it's impacted them on a bigger scale. So I think starting there and really thinking about how your course fits into people's daily life on an ongoing basis is like a smart springboard to get started. And then of course, all the language and the graphics and everything will fill in once you have a strong sense about that.
Yeah, I love that. As a content marketer myself, I love starting with an outline. I think that's great and a really great tip to think about how people can continue engaging with your course rather than having it be something that they just, get over after they look at a couple times, or as you said, maybe not at all. So super great tips there. Let's head into the question and answers so we can start to get some audience questions answered. I really like this first one. How do you balance the admin time, the technology time with your actual creative work? I know this is a really big struggle for solopreneurs who are just getting started. So would love to hear kind of your strategies on balancing the time maybe in the product, building stuff out, and the time brainstorming and putting your thoughts into a course or a script or something like that. Steve, how about you?
Well, for me, I always start with an execution date, a launch date. If you don't have a deadline, it's not going to happen. So I start with the end in mind and I work my way back. So I know that I'm launching a product or an offer for a particular time frame. I know exactly how much time that I need to have and give to it. And, to be honest, of course, as a parent, as a husband, as an entrepreneur, there's so many balls that you're juggling. But, if you also recognize that, first off, this is the launch date, it's a lot easier for you to now say to yourself, what amounts of resources do I need to put into this? Now, we all know, for example, and this is what I use to be personal. We all know about the SMART metaphor, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time bound. But I go a little bit further and I say, what is the strategy that I need to execute for my launch? Right? What are the milestones that I will know that I'm getting closer? So maybe the funnel is done, the copy is done. I need to know what the milestones are. Then I ask myself, what are the actions that I need to take or members of my team need to take so that we make sure that we hit our goals without dropping any balls? The next is, what are the resources we need? And resources come in terms of time and money. And lastly, we ask ourselves, what team do we need to work with to be able, so it could be with our VAs, it could be with our graphic designers, or any of those people. So for me, it's strategy, milestones, actions, resources, and team, but keeping our eye on the ball. That's why we start from the end in mind.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And then we got a question specifically for Grace that I'd love to ask. How did your team validate all of your ideas as you all scaled? We know Steve talked about making sure that there's a demand for your product and how that's important. So would love to hear about idea validation.
Yeah. I mean, we're just a big test and learn group over here. We haven't really, we've done surveys and sort of understand, what are people looking for? Do they want shorter or longer meditations? Are they actually logging in on a regular basis? What would make them do that more? So that's definitely helpful down the line when you have enough customers to get information from. But I think at first, I would really think about, do I want this product? I think what's made me the strongest marketer is the fact that I test everything against my desires and my habits. Would I use this on a regular basis? Would I log into a community group and participate? Would I like to read this email? Would I open it based on the subject line? I think everybody's so thinking about how to cater to what they think other people want, or just comparing themselves to competitors and trying to emulate that, thinking that's a best practice. But if it doesn't resonate with you, it's probably not going to resonate with somebody else. Like if you read a sentence of copy that has all these beautiful words in it and it's all about your mission and your blah, 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 doesn't really matter unless it's appealing to somebody's emotional needs. It's answering a question for them. It's solving a problem for them. So I think really reframing and using yourself as the validator. Would this appeal to me? Does it make sense to me? Is it useful to my life? Would I use this product? Starting from there. And then as your audience grows, yes, of course, look to feedback from them. And of course, we all have different tastes and preferences, but if you're all you have in that moment, test it against yourself.
Right, because there's other people out there who are just like you in all the various demographic and identities that we inhabitate. So if it resonates with you, it might resonate with people like you, which can be a great jumping off point to then building that bigger community and following, where then you can test and use those analytics to continue iterating. We've got this next question here. How can you tell the traits when good is now the enemy of the best? I think we see this a lot. People kind of get overwhelmed and they think it has to be done. It has to be perfect, but it just has to be good enough to go out to market. So, Steve, I know you were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier in your motivation. Would love to see how you kind of think about this and how someone just kind of unblocks that and gets going and overcomes that pressure of quality.
Okay, so that's a fantastic question. So let me put it this way. If somebody was, trapped in a desert for an unbearable period of time and all they wanted was water, would they be so concerned about how the water arrives? Will they say, no, it's not sparkling water. I need some ice with that. Or can I get some lime and lemon with that? No, they're not. What they want is water. So you need to first off recognize that you are offering water to thirsty souls. Now, of course, presentation matters. You don't want them to lap the water like a dog, but it has to be good enough for them. Just exactly like what Grace said, where you test it against yourself and say that, hey, look, if I was thirsty, would I really care so much about how it's presented? No, I just want water. Because they don't really want the bells and whistles. Yes, the lighting can be better, the audio can be better, but what they really, really, truly want is the water that you're giving them. What they really want is the light that you're bringing to them. If somebody's in pitch darkness, they're not going to say, oh, I need some neon lights here, or I need this. What they want is just, if it's a flame, it's a flicker. That's what they're going to get. That's what they're going to take. And from then on, you can revise, you can tweak, you can make it better as you go along, but serve that one person of those 10 people. And then after a while, you can revise and reiterate as you go along. So, yeah.
Right. I think Jay Cron was talking about this a little bit earlier in his section. You can always refilm the video, but you got to film something first. You can refilm the exact same video when you upgrade that camera, when you get that stuff down the line. And that's helpful to remember that just because you're putting something out there doesn't mean that that's the final form. And we see this question that I really like. How do you navigate entering a new market different from your previous one? I know this is helpful as people scale. They're making sure that they can continue to grow their customer base, but then entering into that new market can present some different challenges. Grace, what do you think on this one?
Yeah, I think in this realm, it's really helpful to look at sort of apples to oranges comparison to what you're doing. So can you look at other businesses that have pivoted or that have launched something new and look at how, they gracefully made that transition, whether it's like expanding their product offering or completely pivoting the services that they offered. How can you start to learn from the millions of dollars other people have spent and use that intel for yourself? And then I think the other thing is this also comes back to like the psychological self-doubt, imposter syndrome piece of you're just really beginning again. And how can you approach it like that instead of, trying to perfect it out the gate? Because obviously you're going to continue to learn and grow as you launch new things. And maybe you find out that's something you want to lean into completely and leave the other thing behind. But again, it's just a big experiment. Nobody has it totally figured out. Definitely look at examples to get inspired, but don't let that hold you back from just giving new things a try.
Right. There are any number of brand extensions that have happened, companies that create a new product. I know one thing that we might think of is like Dyson, they were vacuum cleaners and then now they're hair tools. Yeah. So if they can do it, someone can create a different digital product for a different market. And we've got one last question. We're almost out of time. So Steve, got a quick fire one for you. How do you distinguish your brand in a very saturated market? Yes, you offer premium value, but how does that become a selling point?
Well, I think for me, a brand really is about the emotional connection that people have towards you. And I always say that your brand must evoke one of these 5 emotional connections. If it doesn't, then it's not going to resonate. You're going to be one of the saturated. Number one, people must love you. You can be intentional about how you position your brand with love. Another is you can create an us against them brand where you target and identify that this is the enemy that we're all up against. It may not necessarily be a competitor. It may be something we're trying to deal with, right? Another one is where you recognize that people with your brand will either love to hate you. Number 4, they will hate to love you. Or number 5, they will ignore you. So you've got to ask yourself, which of these emotions do I want to be very deliberate at positioning? I fall in the category most generally of people who either love to hate or hate to love. But when you come meet me, you find out I really do love you. I really do want you to win. But that's the brand that you put out there. So if you don't do any of one of those 4, you're going to end up in the 5th, which is in the ignore category. And we don't want that.
Yeah, really great wisdom there. Well, we are at time, so I want to thank you, Steve and Grace, for taking the time to be here today and sharing your advice. Really great to hear from 2 different creators on how we can overcome perfection paralysis and just get those products out the door.